Hi, I'm Helen Cumming. I have ADHD and dyslexia, and I'm a chartered engineer.
Yeah, my name's Tim Rutter. I'm 46 years old and I was diagnosed with ADHD and autism about a year and a half ago.
Hi, I'm Charlie and I'm a data manager.
So I was suspicious that I had autism probably about 5 years ago, and I eventually got around to getting an assessment and was diagnosed with autism. I think the reason I was suspicious of that was because I had been reading about it and had various friends who had diagnoses, and I started to recognise those traits in myself. I didn't consider ADHD at all, and then when I had the autism assessment, the woman said, "Have you ever considered ADHD?" Which for me was a total curveball. I had no idea. And then I think since then I've realised that actually it's the ADHD that is the more challenging part of my particular flavour of neurodivergence. So it's been a bit of a journey finding out about that one. But it's answered quite a few questions.
Actually, I didn't really ever think I had ADHD. I had a friend come up about 2 years ago, actually my best friend, known her since I was 3, and stayed for the weekend. And within about 36 hours, she just repetitively pointed out to me all the things I do that were ADHD. I then brought this up as a funny anecdote to my friends and family, and everyone just kind of said, yeah, we've always thought you had it. And so that's how I thought I might have it.
I am prone to wander off task if I see something that's more interesting. Ended up signing up for a well-known therapy platform. Diagnosed a generalised anxiety disorder initially, and he gave me some cognitive behavioural therapy, and he helped me through sort of some of the reducing the anxiety stuff, and then he started noticing my traits, the things, my coping mechanisms, the way I interact with the world. And I think it was round about January, February time 2021, it kind of goes, I think you've got ADHD.
It was really easy for me to get a diagnosis because I used to be a IET member. So I just reached out to Foothold and they supported that whole process. I think I had my official diagnosis within about a month of starting the process.
Yeah, so I read about it and I never quite believed that I actually had it, would get assessed as having it. And yet I'd spent a lot of my adult life feeling like I didn't quite fit in, or couldn't cope in certain situations very well, or found certain situations challenging.
It was important for me to access an official diagnosis because I didn't just want to have people anecdotally referring to me to having, a neurodiverse condition. I wanted to have more information about myself and know if it was factual, just to know more about myself.
I was looking for it because I thought you needed it to get support, and I have since learned you don't, because I do a lot of work, especially within the company I work for. I do a lot of advocacy around that as well. You don't need a diagnosis to get support through things like access to work, but it makes it easier for people to advocate for themselves if they've got that label.
As I say, the ADHD was a surprise, but I realise now that I constantly start projects and don't finish them.
Yeah, so I noticed once people started pointing things out and then I got my diagnosis, I started noticing a lot more things. So impulse control, struggling to not interrupt people when they're talking, not to just get up and walk away from a conversation, not to be in the middle of something and get very distracted by something on the way to another task and never go back to it because I've forgotten about it.
I jump between hobbies and activities and don't tend to stick at things. I mean, I play the piano, but I can never perfect a piece. I just get bored of it and move on. I'm very, very forgetful. Getting out of the house is always a challenge. I have to really, and I'm trying to put in place methods of getting out of the house better, but I still just give myself 10 minutes to get everything ready. And so that time blindness aspect, thinking you can do more in a time than you have any hope of doing.
Also, one really big thing that I've noticed now and I'm much more aware of, but that I'm really bad for, is not actually paying attention. So I have combined, so I am hyperactive, but I mostly go on the inattentive side of things. So actually most of the time when people are talking, I have not paid attention to what they said, but I'm very good at guessing what they've said afterwards. Right. So that's my really big thing is paying attention and keeping myself on track with conversations, tasks, that type of thing.
Being supportive just comes naturally to my boss. So she communicates well. We've got a one-to-one every week because I need that priorities task list, because having those one-to-one meetings on a weekly basis allows me to prioritize my work. It allows me to discuss anything that's concerning me. It's asking the silly questions. It's just different styles of management. Different people work in different ways.
I think, yeah, so with autism, I realised that I really struggle with eye contact, and I've just realised when I read about that as a symptom, I realised that I spend a lot of my time when I'm talking about people thinking about where to look, and so that's distracting. So I'm having to think, well, should I look them in the eye now? Should I look away? Should I look at it? And so I have to really think about it, and I have to consciously do certain facial expressions because I know that you should raise your eyebrows at a particular time.
The silly questions I was asking at those meetings, I wasn't wanting to ask. I wasn't confident enough to ask at the team meetings. Turns out he didn't know the answer to some of these things as well, and he would then take those answers once he found them out back to the team. And there's lots of things like that. There's a lot of, so having that, and as soon as we started having those meetings, it improved the relationship and it improved the team, because lack of confidence, so you can see that in me not wanting to ask something in a team meeting because I've been told that I ask too many questions, and I've been told to be quiet, sit down, shut up constantly, to the point that I struggle to phone colleagues when I need to, because I've been told to minimize myself at work so often. I have to make sure I know why I'm calling somebody, and I've got a really good reason. It's not just to ask a silly question. That's not allowed in my head. And those are the kind of ways that, and it's more the training I've had from being ADHD around people, the asking the questions and being noisy and talking incessantly, because it's just one of those traits. So you get to the point that your coping mechanism is just putting a cap on something that comes to you naturally.
I don't necessarily know if I think it's so much specifically about ADHD, but I think it's generally just having more compassion and flexibility and acceptance for how people are, and that they're going to come to a situation with different abilities and skills and weaknesses and strengths, and that if you allow flexible working, and it can allow a lot of different people to flourish in a lot of different ways. So yeah, I think just everyone in society just being a bit more accepting and willing to let people kind of do things their own way, will let everyone bring something to their table that's a bit different.
It's only a disability if the environment you're in disables you. So a lot of people have ADHD traits, and a lot of workplaces are not ideal for people with ADHD.
You often hear that, well, we're all a bit on the spectrum, or we've all got a bit such as it. And I think that statement is kind of true in that we are all different. But when you have a diagnosis, you have symptoms to a level where it is challenging to your life. That's the point of getting the diagnosis, in my view. And so I wish people wouldn't dismiss. It feels like a dismissal when someone says, "Oh, we're all a bit on the spectrum." And as I say, I do think that is the case, that you have people who have a symptom of autism, but it doesn't mean that that's the same as having a diagnosis of autism or ADHD, because that is that sort of disabling element of it where there are things that you find very challenging.
You can change the environment and make it more acceptable. I tend to work from home mostly now because being in open plan offices is so full of distractions. So allowing your person with ADHD to have a quiet space, allowing them to have noise cancelling headphones. I had one manager who wouldn't allow people to have headphones until, thankfully, I mentioned my dyslexia, and my line manager was like, right, that gives me an excuse. That's okay. You're covered, but you shouldn't have to have an excuse to have some way of shutting out the distractions of an open plan office.
To me, the word neurodivergence is key. It's that we are not all the same. The word, divergence. I think it's people. You often hear we're all a bit on the spectrum, or we've all got a bit, such as it. And I think that statement is kind of true in that we are all different. But when you have a diagnosis, you have symptoms to a level where it is challenging to your life. Yeah, so I mean, I've, with not great success, been trying to change. So I mean, I work as a software developer, and I've been in 3 different teams recently, and in none of those teams has there been any kind of attempt to establish how people work and what works well for some and what works well for others. I really struggle with 2-hour meetings. I cannot concentrate on a 2-hour meeting, particularly when they're unplanned, because then I've got this conflict of I had a plan for the day and it's been changed. That's the autistic side, but then I've got to the hyper focus is broken, all these things, and so I just zone out and then don't pay any attention. So that sort of, I try to push for when you've got a new team starting. You get a sort of ways of working discussion going where people say, let's not have any meetings in the afternoon. It's important to get that hyper focus time.
It has changed my mindset on now being more aware that I have ADHD, and actually there's really specific environments that I'm gonna flourish in, is that I'm now specifically looking for employers, not because of a salary package or a benefit scheme or whatever, because of their culture and whether it will allow me to flourish the way that I am. And so that's because Foothold's been able to do that for me. So I think, it's been a really good opportunity. And so I think that's just something that I would want to share with people. It might not be, you don't have to change anything about yourself. I'm not on medication, I'm not on anything, and I don't plan to be. But I've found a company that can support me in the way that I need. So that's all I needed.